She never saw it coming. The morning was ordinary, the kind where you throw on your jacket, grab your keys, and pull into work just a few minutes behind. Nothing out of place, nothing suspicious, but just outside the leasing office where she worked, 24-year-old Alyssa Burkett stepped into a nightmare she couldn't escape. She didn't know someone had been following her for days, watching her, planning. And that morning, October 2nd, 2020, all of it exploded. A single mother, custody dispute, and a plan so cruel, so methodical, it would shake the entire state of Texas. This wasn't just a murder. It was a campaign. A slow-burn plot designed to strip Alyssa of her power, her peace, and ultimately her life. But to understand the full horror of what happened, we have to go back. Before the headlines, before the surveillance tapes, before the blood on the pavement. Back to when Alyssa Burkett was just a bright, big-hearted girl, doing everything she could to build a future. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. Who was Alyssa Burkett? Alyssa Burkett didn't grow up with silver spoons or handed-down privilege. She wasn't born into a life of ease, no safety net, no shortcuts. What she had was stronger than all of that. A relentless work ethic, a fire in her chest that pushed her through every obstacle, and a love for her family that anchored her through every storm. She was the kind of person you noticed in a room, not because she demanded attention, but because her presence radiated warmth. Her laugh was unfiltered, unforced, the kind that broke tension like sunlight cracking through a storm cloud. She could joke with strangers and comfort friends in the same breath. Her co-workers described her as dependable. Her friends called her fearless. Her family called her the backbone. But if you ever asked Alyssa who she was, who she really was, she wouldn't tell you about her job, or her goals, or her strength. She'd tell you about Willow. Her daughter wasn't just a chapter in her life. She was the center of the story, the axis around which Alyssa's world spun. The reason she stayed up late and got up early. The heartbeat in everything she did. From the moment Willow was born, Alyssa transformed. Not just into a mother, but into a force of nature. Motherhood didn't slow her down. It honed her focus. It was as if every cell in her body rearranged itself with one mission: protect, nurture, and raise her little girl in love and stability. By day, she was a manager at a title company, organized, capable, and trusted. The kind of woman who handled contracts, clients, and chaos without breaking a sweat. By night, she was a bedtime story reader, a sing-along partner, a calming presence during fevers and bad dreams. And yet, even as she balanced the weight of the world, she made it look effortless. But behind that composure, behind the flawless eyeliner and the quick smile, a storm was forming. It didn't show up all at once. It started with tension, glances over her shoulder, uneasy handoffs during custody exchanges, and eventually, a growing sense of dread that refused to leave. Because storms don't always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they come quietly. Sometimes they come in the form of a man who refuses to let go. His name was Andrew Beard. When Alyssa Burkett first met Andrew Beard, she wasn't looking for chaos. She was looking for connection. Someone to share laughter with over takeout. Someone to build routines with. Someone to dream beside. She wanted what most young women want: a quiet kind of happiness. And in the beginning, Andrew seemed to offer exactly that. He was reserved, soft-spoken, measured. He listened more than he talked. He gave off the impression of a man who didn't chase drama. The kind of guy who returned shopping carts, showed up early, kept his promises. To most, he came across as mild-mannered and harmless. The sort of person you'd trust to help with a flat tire or walk your dog while you were away. Alyssa, then in her early 20s, was still discovering who she was. She was open-hearted, naturally forgiving, and gave people the benefit of the doubt. In the early days, there were smiles, laughter, talk of the future. There were moments of peace, of possibility. Then came Willow, their daughter, and with her arrival, everything changed. At first, Andrew's demeanor stayed the same, But slowly, that calmness began to calcify. His quiet turned to silence, his steadiness to stillness. And soon, the patience Alyssa once admired began to feel like ice in the room. What once seemed like care turned to control. Little arguments became routine. Subtle criticisms about her parenting choices crept in. He didn't shout. He eroded. He'd question her judgment, dismiss her instincts, undermine her confidence in ways that left her doubting herself more often than not. Eventually, the cracks became fractures. The emotional weight too much. The relationship collapsed under the strain. But the end of their romance didn't end Andrew's presence in her life. Because what they shared wasn't just history, it was a child. And nothing ties people together quite like shared custody. Alyssa didn't want conflict. She wasn't interested in revenge. What she wanted was structure, peace, and a healthy co-parenting dynamic that prioritized Willow's well-being. So when she filed for sole custody, it wasn't out of malice. It was out of necessity. She had become Willow's constant, the one who tucked her in at night, kissed scraped knees, packed school lunches, the one who knew her doctor's name and her favorite bedtime song. Alyssa wasn't keeping Willow from Andrew. She was keeping her daughter's world intact. But Andrew didn't see her parenting as love. He saw it as leverage. And to him, power was never meant to be shared. It was meant to be reclaimed. What followed wasn't just a custody battle. It was a siege on Alyssa's peace of mind, and it was only just beginning. The court case was supposed to be about a child, but for Andrew Beard, it became a weapon. The custody dispute over Willow quickly turned into something more volatile than paperwork and parenting plans. Alyssa fought for sole custody, citing that she had been Willow's main caregiver since birth. She came to court with receipts, proof of stability, routines, school involvement, medical appointments. But Andrew, he didn't come with parenting records. He came with accusations. He painted Alyssa as uncooperative, controlling. He claimed she was trying to push him out, not to protect their daughter, but to hurt him. That narrative, though, didn't match reality. Alyssa's friends described her as tired, yes, but fearfully alert. Every custody exchange filled her with tension. Every text from Andrew read like a chess move. She told people that he'd threatened her behind closed doors, that he used Willow as leverage. And his concern wasn't for fatherhood, it was about domination. While Alyssa and Andrew were still in this fight, Holly Elkins entered the picture. Andrew had met Holly during the height of the custody dispute. A single mother herself, she seemed, at first, like a natural companion. But it quickly became clear, Holly wasn't just a partner. She was an accomplice in resentment. She attached herself to Willow in ways that made Alyssa uncomfortable. At court, Holly sat beside Andrew, not as moral support, but as a silent co-combatant. She inserted herself into decisions, offered unsolicited opinions. She wasn't just helping raise Andrew's daughter. She was helping strategize how to take her away. Alyssa confided in friends that Holly gave her a sick feeling, that there was something about her eyes, too eager, too possessive when she looked at Willow. She wasn't a bonus parent. She was a threat. And behind the scenes, Holly and Andrew weren't just talking about custody. They were talking about Alyssa, obsessively, ruthlessly. Texts would later show that they considered her in the way, that she was the obstacle keeping them from building the family they wanted. And so, together, they built a campaign, not to co-parent, not to compromise, but to erase Alyssa. By the summer of 2020, Alyssa was no longer just fighting for custody. She was fighting to keep control of her reality. She felt it before she saw it. The unease, the sense of eyes on her that shouldn't be there. It started with late-night texts from unknown numbers. Then came the strange messages, vague, hostile, and laced with venom. Anonymous claims, threats about her daughter. Then silence, only to return days later. Not quite long, she noticed her car was acting strange. One day, Alyssa took it in for a routine inspection and the mechanic found it. A hidden GPS tracker. Small, magnetic, and dangerously precise. Whoever had placed it knew everywhere she went. How long she stayed. When she'd be alone. She didn't say it out loud at first, but her friends knew she was thinking it. It's Andrew. Her co-workers at the title company began to notice the shift. Alyssa, who was usually sharp, cheerful, tireless, started arriving tense. She would check her phone like it might burn her. On one such occasion, she had cried in the break room after finding a stranger's threatening note on her windshield. Still, she showed up every day. For her clients. For Willow. But she was unraveling. It didn't stop at surveillance. One day, she found a gun and a bag of drugs inside her car. Not hers. Never had been. She called the police to inform them of what she had found. They ran prints, but nothing came back. But within her, she knew what this was. Most likely a setup. An attempt to paint her as unfit. Dangerous. Someone who shouldn't be trusted with a child. Behind the scenes, Andrew and Holly were documenting every move she made. Not for court, but for control. Phone records would later reveal Andrew had made Google searches about how to frame someone. And Holly? She wasn't innocent. Texts between her and Andrew revealed discussions about how to make her look bad, how to break her down. They weren't just fighting for custody anymore. They were planning her destruction. And while Alyssa installed cameras and changed routines, she still had no idea just how far they were willing to go. In the weeks leading up to October 2nd, 2020, Andrew Beard wasn't panicking. He was preparing. He started making purchases, not diapers or school supplies, but tools of erasure. Receipts later uncovered showed a disturbing list. He had bought a fake beard, black clothing, gloves, a mask, a knife, and finally a handgun. This wasn't the panic of a desperate man. It was the precision of someone building a costume. Someone who didn't just want to eliminate a person, but to do so without leaving himself behind. Forensics teams would later find internet searches on Andrew's laptop that turned the stomach. How to stab without getting caught. How to silence a woman. How to get away with murder. Meanwhile, Holly Elkins wasn't on the sidelines. She was in the messages, in the planning, in the venom. Text exchanges between her and Andrew painted a picture of emotional co-conspiracy. She encouraged his hatred, fed his fantasy, echoed his rage until it became something more than a conversation. It became a mission. Alyssa, meanwhile, had no idea that Andrew had already mapped out her life and her death. He knew her routine. He knew when she'd arrive at work. He knew which car she drove. He even knew how long it would take her to step from the driver's seat to the front door of her office. He'd followed her, watched her, waited, and now he was ready. The sun had barely risen on October 2nd, 2020. The world around Alyssa was just beginning to stretch awake. Delivery trucks humming, neighbors sipping coffee, coworkers clocking in. But for Andrew Beard, this wasn't just another Friday. It was execution day. He pulled into the parking lot of the Green Tree Apartments leasing office, where Alyssa worked, dressed in dark clothing, gloved, his face hidden behind a false beard and mask. He looked nothing like himself, just a shadow waiting for a target. Alyssa's car arrived moments later. She was right on time, just like she always was, juggling work emails, maybe thinking about weekend plans, texting a friend. She didn't see him coming. As she parked, Andrew pulled up alongside her, driver's side to driver's side. Without warning, he fired a bullet into her car window, shattering glass and flesh in one violent instant. But Alyssa was still breathing, still moving. Wounded and dazed, she stumbled out of the car and tried to reach the leasing office door. Her bloodied hand left a red streak on the glass as she pounded for help. But Andrew wasn't finished. He chased her down, and with a knife in hand, stabbed her repeatedly in broad daylight. There was no mercy in the assault. No hesitation, just rage, focused, feral, and silent. By the time coworkers rushed out, Alyssa lay in a pool of blood. The pavement that once carried her to work each morning had become her final ground. Andrew fled, but in his wake, he left behind a storm of grief, and a crime scene too brutal to ignore. The moment police arrived at the scene, they knew this wasn't random. It was too personal, too deliberate, too fast. There were witnesses, surveillance cameras, blood trails. The attack had unfolded in plain sight, but the killer had vanished. like smoke in the wind. Still, the clues he left behind would start to close in like a trap he'd set for himself. First came the surveillance footage. A blurry figure in dark clothing and a false beard could be seen approaching Alyssa's car. The attacker's movements were sharp and targeted, not a robber, not a stranger. This was someone who knew her habits, knew her fear. Police quickly traced the vehicle seen in the footage to Andrew Beard. From that moment on, everything began to unravel. Search warrants turned up damning evidence. There was store receipts for the disguise, GPS data placing Andrew near the murder site, internet searches on how to kill without getting caught, gun and knife purchases tied directly to his credit cards. Then came the digital footprint, texts, calls, and emails that revealed a pattern of months-long stalking and psychological warfare. The most disturbing pieces of the puzzle? The messages between Andrew and Holly Elkins. They weren't just supportive of each other, they were strategic, cold, clinical. Holly encouraged Andrew to push harder in court, referred to Alyssa as an obstacle, reaffirmed that she was ruining everything. Their words weren't just bitter, they were fuel. Investigators even uncovered fake police reports filed against Alyssa in the months before her death. Claims of drug use, reckless behavior, child endangerment. All of them were unfounded, designed to ruin her credibility as a mother. It wasn't just a murder. It was a smear campaign that ended in blood. The weight of the evidence was crushing. Andrew Beard was arrested. Holly Elkins followed soon after. But justice wasn't just about proving what they did. It was about proving how long they had planned it. The courtroom was silent. Not with peace, but with tension so thick it choked the air. When Andrew Beard appeared before the judge, there were no tears, no breakdown, no plea for sympathy. He pleaded guilty to cyberstalking with a dangerous weapon resulting in death and discharging a firearm during a crime of violence. He didn't contest the evidence because he couldn't. Everything he'd done had been meticulously documented. The purchases, the searches, the GPS tracker, the surveillance. His own digital trail had done more to convict him than any witness ever could. What shocked the court wasn't just what he did, but how calmly he explained it. He described smothering Alyssa's voice long before the bullet or the blade ever touched her. He admitted to planting fear in her car, in her phone, in her mind, so that by the time he ended her life, he had already stolen her peace. And what about Holly Elkins? She didn't pull the trigger. She didn't wield the knife. But her fingerprints were all over the plan. She had encouraged him, supported the smear campaign, helped manufacture the false image of Alyssa as unstable, unfit, unworthy. Prosecutors revealed chilling messages between the two, conversations laced with resentment, jealousy, and calculated malice. Holly spoke of wanting a life without drama, while Andrew responded with plans that would make that possible. In June 2022, Andrew Beard was sentenced to 43 years in federal prison, a number that sounded large but felt small compared to what he took away. In April 2024, a jury convicted Holly Elkins of conspiracy to stalk using a dangerous weapon resulting in death and brandishing a firearm in relation to a crime of violence. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Neither of them cried. Neither of them begged. They simply vanished behind steel doors, while the rest of the world mourned Alyssa Burkett. There are no happy endings in this story. Just a child, Willow, who will one day grow old enough to ask why her mother is gone. And there are no easy answers. How do you explain that a woman who worked tirelessly, who smiled through exhaustion, who carried a child in her arms and a target on her back, was taken by the very people who claimed to want what was best? How do you explain that her love, her fear, her every attempt to protect her daughter, was met with violence? Alyssa Burkett's murder didn't happen in the shadows. It happened in broad daylight, in a suburban parking lot, in front of people who will never forget the sound of her scream. Her family will never unsee the footage. Her friends will never unhear the voicemails. And Willow, too young to understand the word murder, will grow up carrying the silence it left behind. There were moments after the sentencing that felt like closure. But no prison term can return a mother to her child. No guilty verdict can rewind the years that were stolen. All it can do is mark the truth, that Alyssa deserved more, and that she didn't die because she was reckless or weak. She died because she was strong, because she refused to be silent, because she stood her ground and someone couldn't stand that. This case is a chilling reminder of what happens when control turns obsessive, when bitterness becomes a blueprint for destruction, when justice comes too late. But let her name be more than a headline. Let it be a warning, call to attention, a legacy. Alyssa Burkett was a mother, a fighter, a woman who deserved to live. And though her voice was stolen, her story must be told. Again and again, until the silence breaks. Thank you for watching. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about Alyssa's murder? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.